Pat, it's May, and we're talking about FlashDance. I don't know what one has to do with the other, but this felt, when I was looking at movies, I'm like, yeah, this could be a fun kickoff to the summer, I guess. It's celebrating its 40th anniversary. It's a film that
Yep.
I've never seen before. So what
Ah,
better occasion for a nostalgia like nostalgia than FlashDance, as Bill Hicks
yes.
once intoned from the writer, Basic Instinct was from the writer of FlashDance. So I kind of knew
Oh,
what I
well,
was in for.
I finally the weather is good enough to go out and flash people. So I think that's
That is not an endorsement. Um,
I
unless
um
unless you
I
mean like a
noted that
flash
its
mob or
release
something.
date I noticed his release date was April 15th of 83. And then one of the facts in it was that it was one of the few movies released at that time that wasn't a summer movie or wasn't a tentpole holiday movie that made over 200 million.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those films that became, it was the, I think it's the third highest grossing film of 83 with $200
Mm-hmm.
million. I mean, that's obscene money, especially for, as you mentioned, it's
I
not
can't,
like a blockbuster. It's not associated with any kind of IP.
right.
It just took off despite being like horribly panned by critics, and probably
Oh,
aided by that killer soundtrack.
well, yeah. I mean, it was just the timing was just perfect for it because MTV was in its beginnings, and they rushed to create music videos associated with the film. The first time any film had ever done that, and then afterward, you had to have a music video. No matter what the subject of your film was, you had to have a music video. So it was, and it opened at 6 million, I read, and then once it hit MTV, boom, it took off and played theaters for months. So yeah, I
Well,
know. Isn't that crazy?
well, what's crazier is that you saw it when it first came out, and then the second time
Yep.
you saw it, if I understand right, is for this show. So
40 years and 1 month later. I don't know when I saw it back in the day, but I hated it back in the day. I remember hating it so badly. Why? I just come out of film school. I was a cinema snob, and I'm like, oh, this Hollywood trash.
so do
And
you still feel
Eberhard
that
is on
way?
his most hated.
Oh,
No,
that's
no way. This is an icon, man. I was like, I can see why people loved it. You finally, you're all this, whatever's blocking your vision is out of the way, and you're actually watching it for what it is. It's an icon of its era. Several things in it that make it great.
and that's a very interesting way to kind of get into this conversation because yeah, I'd never seen it before watching for the show, but I knew Flashdance. There's Irene Cara's song "What a Feeling," which regardless of the movie, I that's one of my motivational songs. I love that song. I play it all the time.
Sure,
But also there's
it's a
the
perfect
whole.
pop song.
It is. It really is. But then you've
Yeah,
got the iconic splashing the water down. She's sitting in the chair on the
yeah,
stage and she pulls the thing, the water
yeah.
splashes down. The whole working out, dancing in the leg warmers
Oh
to
my God.
Maniac. I mean, just the visuals have been all over pop culture in, Gremlins,
Yeah,
I think parodied this a couple of years later.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that it's one thing for a movie to have iconic status. It's another to watch it and think, the visuals and the music and the iconography aside, is the movie any good? And I'm kind of uneven on it, honestly. I'm eager to
Right.
talk to you about it.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. Before I forget, the Irene Cara thing, it was actually sung by Joe Esposito, What a Feeling. And they said, no, we can't have a dude sing it. So Cara had just done Fame. So they
Mhm.
hired her to do the song, but they told her to rewrite the lyrics to make it, to switch the genders. She wrote it on the way to in the back of a cab. She wrote the lyrics on the way to the studio session, and then ended up winning an Oscar for that song.
Isn't that just the
That to
way?
me is great show business. Great show business. Okay, well, in the first viewing, I could absolutely see why it is uneven. The story is a clunker when you think about it.
Well, and this is one of those problems with looking at a movie that's this old and having seen a lot of movies very similar to it in
Right,
the intervening decades. I don't know if
right,
this was cliche when it came out or if the popularity of this kind of gave rise to this kind of storytelling because it's the classic, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I'm working at a job that's unrelated to my passion. I want to be an artist, a dancer, a movie
right,
maker, whatever. There's obstacles. Perhaps there's a contest and someone gives me a leg up in getting into the school or getting into the program, and I
right.
find out about it and I question my self-worth and there's a big fight. So yeah, we've seen all of this before. I don't know,
Yeah,
like when you watched it,
it's
was it
rooted.
old hat then?
Well, it's rooted to me in the old Hollywood system. Hey kids, let's put on a show sort of tradition. I mean, you've seen this. By the time the story emerged, you had seen it before, in different variations and forms, but you'd seen it before.
Mhm.
And as you said, because it established a new visual style, suddenly in the subsequent 40 years, you've seen variations on Flashdance, both in MTV and other movies going forward.
Yeah,
Basic Instinct from the guy who wrote Flashdance.
and that's something I was
Perfect.
surprised at. I thought that, going into this movie, I knew very little about it except
Right.
Alex, who was Jennifer Beals' character, was, she worked as a welder, at a Pittsburgh, steel mill, I guess, by day, and then by night, I thought she was a stripper, but she's an exotic dancer at this kind of dive bar called Mobbies, but she's not. It's
Right.
it's a very strange situation because she doesn't get full nude. There's a bar across the town that does all the really
Right.
sensationalized stuff. But I was struck by the elaborate costumes and stage productions and just the kind of
Yeah,
avant-garde
that's the
weirdness.
absurd.
Yeah, the
This is a
guys.
dive bar that you see in Chicago. Imagine a dive bar in Chicago, and then the lights go down, and suddenly this uh, Tina Tech comes on.
I mean,
Tina Tech.
she had the television blowing, like the famous kind of the stereo ad where the TV is like blowing her backwards, and then she gets up and she
Right.
changes costumes on stage. The corner of the stage has been painted like this black and white grid prison system. I don't know what's going on, but my main question is, did people who showed up to this bar to drink beers and look at attractive women really sign on to this, like this Cirque du
No.
Soleil stuff? I don't
Well,
know.
the when she does the iconic water thing, there's a quick cutaway to these beer drinkers, after their shift. Hey, what are you doing there? They're not watching. You have this elaborate, choreographed dance, and this very lithe woman gets completely wet in front of you, and you're still worried about your beer. What kind of
Hey,
bar is this?
they paid good money for that beer, I'm sure. Um, that's the other strange
Iron
thing.
City.
Mm, well, that's the other strange thing is I had always assumed that iconic, there's that word again, that iconic splash water thing was like a big climactic moment in the movie, but no, that's the first like 20 minutes or 15.
Yeah, I was stunned too because I wasn't sure where it was, but I didn't think it was in the beginning. It was
Yeah.
great.
Um,
Get it over with.
So Alex is 18 and she's working in the
Right.
steel mill, which is owned by Nick. And Nick is played
Yes.
by Michael Nouri. Uh,
Yeah.
I there's a visual contrast there. I don't want to get into the ageism thing, but it's hard watching a movie from 1983 in 2023 and separating the sensibilities. I try and meet movies on their own terms, but I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
she's just out of high school and he is literally more than twice her age. And he's the
Oh,
boss,
yeah.
and he's asking her
Yeah,
out,
he's
and they're having a
36.
lovers yeah, they're having a lovers spat on the construction site and, like, screaming at each other. I'm like, "What is going
Right.
on here?"
And then when they make up, the workers are there cheering like they this is an ordinary event.
Yeah.
I have to read this little fact because you brought it up. In a 1984 essay for the journal Jump Cut, Catherine Kay questioned the characterization of Alex. How could an 18-year-old woman land a skilled labor job as a welder in the unionized steel industry of an economically depressed union town?
I think I'd seen that. I think I'd seen
Yes.
that quote too. And yeah, it's a fantasy. I mean,
Yes, total fantasy.
this movie isn't interested in the lives of, steel workers, really. It's just to show, it's kind of like those 80s music videos, and maybe this is where they came from, where you've got like the shirtless
Right.
hairband guys, like as Patton Oswalt said, just hanging out in a factory that just manufactures sparks, like rubbing shoulders and rocking out. It makes no sense, but it's a place for the story to start. So I guess.
Well, in the pantheon of great movies about steel making, does this make the top 10? We don't know. How many movies about steel making has there been?
Do the Transformers movies count? I don't know.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
I just, one of the things about the act, okay, the Splashing Water Act and Tina Tech and all that, as somebody who has to talk to bartenders and people who own bars to get a gig, they are the worst people to deal with in the world. So I was thinking of the pitch. So, and the backstage is like the backstage of Showgirls. They're all sitting there. Richie looks in on them. It's just like Richie, in case anybody
Oh,
hasn't
these the
seen it,
stand
is
up
an
the would-be
up-and-coming
stand-up
comic
comic, yeah.
who tells politically incorrect jokes about Polacks. And I can't even use that word these days.
Well,
Much
the
less
cat is out
tell
of
a
the bag.
Polak joke. But
Well,
anyway, I was just thinking of the pitch session. I've got about 4 or 5 girls who want to do these, Cirque du Soleil. I've never even heard of Cirque du Soleil, says Jake.
well,
Why
look,
was he dressed up as a big pink rabbit in the Halloween scene? That's another weird.
I couldn't tell if it was a rabbit or a dog or what. It was just a furry thing with ears. I don't know. But no, since you've already mentioned our comic Richie,
Mm-hmm.
who has probably the most annoying laugh of anyone I've seen in a movie ever, and that was probably part of the character, but I'm like, they pushed it way too
Yeah,
far. Um,
yeah.
One of his great jokes, and again, this I'm quoting verbatim, so don't come at me, you two, but it was like because he had like 25 quote unquote Polak jokes. Just
Yeah, that was
he
wild.
I'm wondering if he was actually Polish and it was like a self-deprecating thing, or if he just like had a real like animosity. But he said, what is I'll just say Polish criminal, what does the Polish criminal do at the bank heist? And he says he ties up the safe and blows the guard. Oh man.
And then completely screws up the punchline when he actually gets up. I pictured him going to LA and getting beaten up by a young Sam Kinison backstage at what was the Pauly Shore Club?
Oh yeah,
Mitzi Shore.
it wasn't the Laugh Factory. It
Catch a
was
Rising well, just beaten
uh
up at a club by a young Sam Kinison. That's why he went back to Pittsburgh.
and that might explain why he made this big deal about leaving to go to LA, but he
Yeah,
randomly just shows up at Alex's loft space and just like, "Hey, I'm leaving for LA. Bye."
right.
But
And
it
then he
seemed like he
comes
was gone for
back
2
like
days. Yeah.
he just like he just drove there and drove back, I think. I don't know.
Yeah,
It
'cause
was odd. There was a lot of continuity issues, and this is one of those movies. And here's a question I wanted to ask you: if this movie were made today, okay, so obviously it's going to be different, right? It would be of today. Where would it premiere? Would it premiere in theaters, or would it premiere on Paramount Plus, or would it get 2 weeks and then VOD? It's such a weird movie that I don't know where it would belong if it was made today, is what my question is. What do you think it would be?
I don't know if this movie would get made today.
Mhm.
And not just because of I
Right.
mean, partially it's because of the weird things that you wouldn't think about in 1983 or even in 2003.
Right.
You've got a conventional romance between two, a heterosexual man and woman, and they end up together at the end and they're happy. I mean, when was the last time you saw a damn comic book movie where, people were romantically interested in each other? It just, yeah, I think they would have to, they'd probably turn it into an LGBT story of any note.
Well, it's ironic you say that, but because of this movie, Jennifer Beals became a lesbian icon. That was in the facts and figures section. I'm like, "What?"
Well,
I That's
nope.
so underground. It's way underground. It's 6 feet under 6 feet under. That's how underground that is.
Right. And I'm not lobbying
So
that as a
how
criticism.
about the character of Cecil?
Which one was he? Oh,
He was the
wait.
owner of the nudie bar.
Oh, right. What that was Johnny C, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
he was played by Lee Ving, who after this movie he was the henchman for Willem Dafoe in Streets of Fire.
Oh, very good. Well, he
Um,
had that look, so
he did,
so
and the
this is
guy.
sort
Oh, well, I was gonna say the guy who was his sidekick in this movie, the kind of the bruiser brawler
right,
guy, he was actually one of the henchmen to the buddy character in Christine, which came out the same year, the John Carpenter adaptation.
crazy,
Yeah.
crazy.
But no, as
This
far
was a
as
sec this is go ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say the other thing is this movie just seems very like optimistic. What a feeling, Maniac. There's all these sort of uplifting, inspirational songs, and I just don't feel
Mhm,
like we're there anymore. I feel like this is too much
mm.
of almost like a romantic American dream kind of film, and that's what sells today is everything sucks. I'm oppressed. There's no hope for the future.
Jesus
Yada yada
Christ, what
yada.
kind of week did you have?
No, I'm just saying, like, look at the movies that are popular out there. They're not. I mean,
Right.
this stuff would just be kind of cheap, like Reagan era cheesy and hokey by today's standards.
Well, everything reflects its own era. The point I was gonna make, it's like a sex movie without sex.
That
There
too,
is
yes.
implied sex, but what I find weird about her, and again, there's some continuity issues with her character. She constantly is going, well, not constantly. She goes to a priest to confess her sins, that thinks about sex all the time. But then once she has it, she becomes like, Masters and Johnson. Suddenly she's the Kinsey report. She's all over the place. She's an animal. So
Well,
but
it
that's
is fun,
Adrian Lyne too. It's
right? I mean, who did? I mean, the main movie I remember him for
nine and
was
a half weeks, Basic Instinct.
Basic
Yeah.
Instinct was Paul
Yo.
Verhoeven, um,
Oh, okay.
written by Joe Esterhaus, who did
Right.
this movie.
Who was a part of this movie, right?
Right,
Get
but
my
Adrian
references.
Lyne did Unfaithful with Diane Lane and Richard Gere back in 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
there was a lot of sex and violence in that movie. That
Yeah.
was a wild
Well,
one.
9.5 weeks had a lot too.
That's true. That was after this, right? I think that was like a
Yeah.
couple of years later. But as far as her going to confession, I did find it funny that the movie's only like an hour 35, right? But
Mhm.
she goes to confession early on, and then by the time she goes to the very end, we're kind of like, oh, that's right, she's Catholic and she does this. And it's funny because she said, it's been a long time since my last confession. I'm like, boy, howdy. Because you're right, she confesses and then she goes off and she'll, sleep with Nick and do all this stuff and get into like blow up fights, driving through tunnels. And then she comes back to wipe her soul clean.
The one thing that struck me this time was Tina Tech. She's now one of my '80s icons. Uh,
Who is this?
T, Tina Tech was the second dancer at Mowbry's. She was the one that did the extreme um, flashing lights dance and
She had the short
the
hair and yeah. Is that right?
right. And
Yeah.
she did the flip off the wall dance. It was like very, very sexual without, without showing anything. Although it wasn't her sister. Jeannie wasn't her sister, right? The skater.
No, she was just a friend. Although it was kind of
Okay.
confusing because there is a dinner
Right.
scene at Jeannie's
Right.
house, but it's kind of presented as they're all sitting around they don't set it up, and that's fine, but you kind
Right.
of get the feeling that, Alex is visiting for dinner and Jeannie's what I loved one of the things I loved about this movie is I didn't care for the central romance at all because again, I found it kind of weird and a little off-putting, but I did like this collection of friends in this Pittsburgh town who each had their own
Right.
dreams and, pursuing them to different degrees and, failing in different ways. And then Alex is finally, she doesn't necessarily get out because we don't know how that dance audition like went or the callbacks or when she got into school at the end. But at least she took those first steps. But I liked Richie's story, with the stand-up comedian thing. I really liked Jeannie's story. She wanted to be an ice skater and she gets her shot
Right.
and, they do the whole thing with the parent, the dad is just curmudgeonly, he doesn't believe in his daughter, and he's, like, overly harsh towards her, I think kind of comedically so. But then that scene in the kind of the locker room at the end where he goes to console her in his own way, that was really
Right.
touching. I'm like, if the
It
rest of this movie
was.
had had that emotional core, I think this would have been a much better film.
Well, again, it was just continuity issues. And what struck me too was the film's so organic. How the heck does this emerge? It emerges because they get certain people together, they get a killer soundtrack, and they set in Pittsburgh of all places. Before Pittsburgh was a huge filming place, it had a renaissance in the 2000s or maybe even the second decade of the 2000s, where everybody was filming in Pittsburgh because they had the big tax breaks. But back then, that was a steel town. It was a dirty, dirty town, and just to film there is kind of unusual for the time, for sure. And but yeah, so it's just this organic film that came out of a lot of moving parts fitted together awkwardly, and somehow, some way, the geniuses in marketing were able to get it to the 200 mark. Did you read about the woman who the story is based on from Toronto?
No.
Her last name's Mortar. But anyway, it's her life story, right? So they said, we want to do your life story because she was a blue collar worker and a dancer. And she said, fine. And she goes, so they start negotiating, and she said, well, I'll take $2,500. And so they drew up the paperwork. She signed on the dotted line with her lawyer there. And then when it made 200 million, she came back and sued. And the judge said, sorry, you signed. And then she tried to sue again when J-Lo did a video based on FLASHDANCE because she said it was her life story. And lost that case too. I know, it's classic weird. But
Well,
here's
I mean,
another weird thing about
I was gonna say,
Jeannie.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go
The skater, the skater.
mhm.
I forget her actor name, Sunny something. Her first name was Sunny, Sunny.
Sonny
Her
Johnson.
and Laura Branigan, huh? There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
And her and Laura Branigan, who did Gloria, I think, they both died of cerebral hemorrhages.
Oh my God.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Sonny died a year after the movie, and then Laura Branigan died somewhere down the line. Cerebral hemorrhages, both of them, where
Ugh.
you feel like you have a headache, and then suddenly you're dead.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Yep,
tragic.
yep. Popped out
Uh,
of the aorta.
well, it is
So
one of those.
yeah,
It's one of those situations because yeah, I liked her as a character and also as an actress, and I did wonder like, have I seen her before, or why haven't I seen more of
right.
her? And I guess now I know. Um,
Well, you
but
did see more of her in this film when she was at the Zanzibar. Remind me of that Billy Joel song.
which one?
Tell the waitress I'll be back at Zanzibar. I'll be hiding in the darkness with my beer. It's on 52nd Street.
Okay,
Look it
I
up.
don't. I will because I like Billy Joel a lot. I don't know if I know that song. I probably
Oh,
do. I just
Zanzibar is a great song. It really is. Has a
mm,
killer sax solo in the middle of it.
all
Yeah,
right.
52nd Street.
Is it
Of
weird?
course, the famous bra scene. That was huge back in the day.
Oh, where she
Uh,
takes the bra off from underneath her giant ripped sweatshirt. Yeah.
yes, exactly. That was her means of seduction, and it worked. The old man stayed overnight.
It's a weird scene though because she does work her bra off while they're just sitting there talking to each other. But
Right.
I got the feel like he was just ready to leave, and then the next thing you know, they're waking up together. Alex is such a weird
Yeah.
character. In fact, we learn more about Nick than we do about Alex, like where she came from, her family. We find out that Nick grew up poor and used to run around with Johnny C's character, like committing crimes until he finally decided to follow his dreams and become a business owner. But Alex, I don't know
And
anything
suddenly he
about
owns a
her.
steel mill. How'd that happen?
Well, he's 36. He certainly had enough time to figure it out.
Well,
Um,
I'm sorry, I keep saying Lynn. It's Lyne, Adrian Lyne. Is
mhm.
that the pronunciation?
I
Okay.
believe so. Yeah.
Um, he loves the name Alex because Alex was in Flashdance. Alex was in Fatal Attraction. Uh, so there's a whole explanation, but he likes the name Alex, apparently.
Well, yeah. Um, uh, Alex as a woman's name, I take it because I think that's
Right, right.
yeah.
Because
Um,
they're both in both movies. That's another one he did.
I was
Uh,
looking up. I paused the movie when I was watching it because there was something, and this is what I think was kind of a nice and possibly a progressive touch for 1983. Because looking at Jennifer Beals, I couldn't figure out what ethnicity she was because she didn't look like
ah,
a typical like white blonde movie star with a tan. Like there was
mhm.
just something about her. So I looked it up. Turns out A, she's from the south side of Chicago,
Yep,
and B, she comes from mixed parentage, much like me, but
there
she
you
shows
go.
it. She had a black dad and
Yeah,
a white Irish mom. And so that was
there you
something that
go.
was kind of a cool touch. Not that it necessarily means anything, but it's just a visual signifier that there's something more going on in this movie than they could have cast this with anybody. Like, Molly Ringwald could
Right.
have been this this movie, but they went with something a little bit different.
Well, yeah, everybody that was up against her was like Demi Moore and Jennifer, not Dirty Dancing,
Oh,
Jennifer
Jennifer Grey.
Grey.
Yeah.
I mean, it was all white girls, and here this biracial girl comes along from the south side of Chicago, 18 years old, and beats them all. But I have a friend who actually dated her back in the day. Yep.
Okay. This just became an entirely different show. Um,
He's since passed too. He's gone to the great beyond, so too bad.
wow.
Beals went on to do the L Word, I think, right? She
Yeah.
did that series, and I don't know if she's still working or just hanging
I
out on her
I don't
flash
know,
dance
but
money.
here's the thing, like, she in this movie, because I haven't seen I don't think I've seen a lot from her, just as an
Right.
actress, but I really liked her. But there's two different modes of Alex in this movie, and I liked both of them, but I don't think they meshed. The one is the kind
Hmm.
of manic pixie dream girl, she's kind of bubbly and dreamy and optimistic and just, has a smile and is everyone's best friend. But then if you cross her, man, like, she goes and throws a brick through your window. She'll force you to pull over to the side of the road while you're driving through a tunnel in congested traffic. I mean, she goes from, sweet and bubbly to completely unhinged and flipped out. I was honestly amazed that Nick, I mean, I'm sure the romance was great and everything, but wow, there was some serious warning signs there.
Well, he did canoodle with his ex-wife. That was weird too, wasn't it? I mean, it was obviously that they slept together, and he didn't.
I no, it wasn't obvious that he slept with his ex-wife. I mean, they went to that ballet thing or whatever, and then
Mhm,
the next time we see him, he is running out of his house, like putting his shirt and his pants on. But I didn't get
right.
it wasn't implied to me that the ex-wife had slept over. I think he dropped her off at her place because they were divorced, and he makes it clear like the only time they get together is for these charity events because they're both on the board or whatever. But my
Okay, then
point
I
is,
completely.
well, I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, like, I think maybe it was, and again, it's a couple of guys writing this screenplay. I don't know what Joe Esterhaus and, what was the co-writer Thomas Headley Jr. knew about being an 18-year-old girl in 1983, but it just
Right.
this is one of those moments where I think it really having that kind of a female perspective in the writing process would have helped because she just comes off as like she's either dreamy and cute or, completely unhinged and erratic. Maybe they're trying to say something about, the fiery teenage passions or something, but she immediately went to, "I saw you getting into a car with a woman in a fur coat, you two-timer." I'm like, "What?"
Well, it seemed like the conversation they were having, and this is where I got mixed up, that he's implying that, yes, yes, she stayed over, but, that's I just see her once a year. I I picked up that he did that when he was running out unclothed, buttoning up, that she had caught him at, but apparently not. So,
I I'd have to go back and watch that scene again because I don't
yeah,
remember him mentioning that she had stayed over,
shows
but
you how
also,
close I was.
well, you could have been
Yeah, go
focused on
ahead.
other things, but no,
Right.
at the later at the restaurant, um, first of all, I hope I never encounter lobster that is as chewy as Alex made it out to be, because I know she was trying to seductively eat lobster by going and like really working it like a piece of steak, but that's not how lobster is supposed to go. It dissolves like buttery cotton candy in your mouth. But
Well, also too, and this goes to the dichotomy of the character, that presumably she's an innocent 18-year-old and then suddenly becomes, you know, Madame Seductress, with the lobster and the and the foot between the legs under the table. It's
yeah,
just strange.
it was, and
Maybe
Nick
my
was totally
iconic
totally taken
status
back
is
by it.
being
Was that?
you're talking away the iconic status of it. Once we start analyzing the story, there's a lot of big plot holes. Yeah. I always thought the movie seems to me it was thought up in a coke-fueled rage. I'll show those women who didn't go out with me on high school. This is how I'll write an 18-year-old.
But there may be some truth to that. But and it's a shame because I was thinking watching this again, if this were to somehow miraculously be made in 2023 and maintain the same essential elements, right? I think
Mhm.
that people have learned a lot about writing, characters with depth, dimension, nuance, complications that
Right.
go beyond the standard Hollywood fare. I think you could really do something with this story and even with these actors. Maybe our AI overlords will allow us to remake Flashdance, in another 10 years and put some spirit into it. But yeah, I agree. It's frustrating because it does. I loved a lot about this movie, but it was mostly in terms of the audio and the visuals. Like the story was kind of like,
Right, right, exactly. And I was looking at this, I was skimming the surface. I wasn't going underneath.
your
Because
foot wasn't under
again,
the table.
that's right. I again, when I know it made me angry when I saw it the first time. You know, because I was just getting into to really good cinema, but I love the movies, and I would go out and see whatever was popular too. And it kind of upset me that this was hugely popular. It did. One of
now,
those things.
now here's a question though. You were coming out of film school,
Mhm.
as you mentioned. Were you really
Right.
giving the movie, and I'm not judging you. Legit curious because I've fallen into this trap too. Were you judging the
Mhm.
movie just because it was, big, flashy Hollywood product, or were you paying attention to it and seeing, "Oh, this is poorly constructed?" Like, how are you engaging with it?
I was I think I focus on the absurdity of it, and then once you focus on the absurdity of it, that this could never happen, because I happen to be from that area, or my family's from that area of Pittsburgh. So it has a double, here, oh, exciting, a movie shot in Pittsburgh. What is this? This is not the Pittsburgh I know. So there could have been a little prejudice in that area, but I think mostly it was about the story. As we break it down now, I can see why it angered me a bit. But
Yeah.
how about the woman named Hannah, who was just there to die at the end? But then we find out
Oh,
she's a
yes.
Ziegfeld girl.
Yeah, I mean, she and I don't know if that was relationship was really explained. She just kind of shows up and she's going to the
I thought it was her grandma at first, but it wasn't.
no, she's just a friend. And that's again, maybe there was something that was cut out because that relationship, like how did they meet? What do they mean to each other? Was she just part of a senior program that Alex was part of to take people out to the
Well,
shows? I
Alex,
don't
like
know.
as you said, was estranged from any sort of family. I don't know if that was intentional, but here's an 18-year-old living in a loft apartment in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1983, and she's a welder, which takes, I think, a good couple of years to go from apprentice to welder, as I just mentioned. So obviously she was a dropout and dancer and learned to weld. I don't
And that would
know.
have been, as much as I criticize modern movies for getting too much into backstory and over explaining everything, that would have been I could
Right.
have used a disappointed dad or a disappointed mom or something like, oh,
Or
you've always or what?
a flashback, a flashback in Flashdance,
Right.
a simple scene. You could have explained everything. I don't know. But you're right.
Right.
You're right. There was no backstory. She just was flying free at 18 as a welder. Also, she figured out that her older lover set up the audition so fast. I said maybe she should become a private investigator. But she figured that out in lightning speed. And wasn't it odd that he drove a Porsche? I thought it was very odd. You know, uh, Pittsburgh is a steel town. They don't cotton much to foreign cars. Now, Porsche may be different because it's a very expensive luxury car, but it was just odd. And the fact that he drove a Porsche and nobody said anything. And then she finally said, "Why don't you go back to your Porsche?" And I said, "Yes, that's why they showed it in the first act for that line because in the coke fueled rage they came up with that line, so they had to say he's got to have a Porsche." And
The
maybe
po-
Risky Business had come out the year before or
no,
a couple of years
that was the
before.
same year, 1983.
Same year. Is Risky 40 years old this year?
Mhm.
Holy shit.
Um
Holy shit.
but no, it's interesting you mentioned the Porsche because I think that's a bit of depth and detail that's, kind of rare for this movie, but it totally works because when Nick and Alex first kind of meet cute where he's talking to her at the, she's on lunch or whatever, she's reading a copy of Vogue and she's like, "I don't
Yeah,
understand,
that was
what
weird.
it
Go ahead.
well, yeah, but she's like, I don't understand what they're, saying. I just like the pictures or whatever. It's a very fancy French magazine. I feel like that's the kind of same thing. The reason that Nick might be driving the Porsche, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's a very aspirational vehicle from someone who comes from nothing. If he strikes it rich, he's like, I'm gonna go buy a Porsche
Right.
because I can.
Right.
And as for people leaving the car alone, he's the big boss in this, steel town. You're not going to go. I think people know that that's the boss man's ride. Leave it alone.
Exactly. Well,
Same.
it's interesting about this. Hmm?
Oh, I was going to say same thing with those workers. Kind of, I mentioned beforehand when Nick and Alex get into a fight on in the work yard. And then they eventually make up and everybody's applauding. It is totally inappropriate. But then you stop and think, well, yeah, it's the boss man. What are you going to do? But then you think, what's the dark side of that situation? Like when they're having a spat,
Very
he starts
dark.
like slapping her around or something, or he's propositioning her, and that, it's a whole like Me Too thing. That's why I'm
Uh,
watching this movie, and there's part of me that's engaged, and another part of me is like utterly skeeved out because I'm like, this does not work anymore. Not that it ever did.
well, I think you nailed it when you said two guys trying to write for an 18-year-old. You know, how many Academy Awards was this nominated for? Best two for best song, Maniac and Flashdance. What a feeling were both nominated, and it was for cinematography too. And the cinematography was good because it was mostly the scenes were at night, but they all worked. But they didn't look like what's the term, day for night, where
Mm.
they switch it. It was lit right for the nighttime. But I also read that Mowbreeze didn't exist in Pittsburgh. They didn't shoot those scenes in Pittsburgh. They did that on the back lot. So,
Mm.
but heck. And here's a film that nobody would ever expect to get any sort of nomination, and they got four. There was one other, and I can't remember what it was for. Maybe score or something. No, there wasn't a score in it.
Well,
But
there
yeah,
was there was a score, and I thought it was really nice because a lot of it were kind of riffs on What a Feeling, but more like kind of the somber, melodious. Alex is thinking about her future, her love life. It's a very sweet
right.
sounding score if you listen to it. Um, my only thought as far as the Oscars goes, and we see this kind of nowadays too, it made a whole lot of money. And so I think they wanted
Yeah.
to recognize like, hey, it's not the best movie ever, but it kept us a lot of us in jobs. So let's throw it a bone.
Well, it was definitely going to get the thing for best song, but the fact that it it won one Oscar for the song, of course, and I'm just bringing up the nominations. It was nominated for best cinematography, best film editing, of course,
Okay. I can
and then
understand.
Maniac and go ahead.
Well, I can understand cinematography and editing because
Right.
at the very
Oh
end,
yeah.
and maybe it's because I rented this on Amazon, so it was a nice kind of high definition transfer. That's a problem when most, if not all, of the dancing in this movie was not done by Jennifer Beals. It was
Right.
done by it was a dancer, Marianne Jahan. And there
Yeah.
was actually a
French
couple of different
dancer.
people who did different aspects of her performance, like the big,
Right.
I guess the jump through the
The
air scene was
gymnast.
someone, yeah, Sharon Shapiro. Um, it's but
And then a
the problem
dude did
is
the break dancing.
Crazy Legs, yes.
Yeah.
Now the problem I have is that I mean, I guess it's a film and it's supposed to maintain the illusion, but I was very much caught up in that. I was looking at it, I'm like, that's not Jennifer Beals. And then I started noticing that's probably why she had that crazy hair because her hair in this movie is like the sixth main character. It's just like this totally out there, like puffy, Jerry curl or whatever the hell she has going on. And then I realized at the
Yeah.
end during the big audition, I'm like, it's to help cover up with the editing and the cinematography that's not our lead girl doing the dancing.
Well, and another thing, they they never. again, I read this in the notes, but they never hid the fact that there were other people doing the dancing, but they wouldn't put the other dancer in the credits because they wanted to maintain a sort of an illusion, which is weird because they didn't want to hide the fact that they had other dancers, but yet they didn't want to make a big deal about the fact either. Keep the illusion.
Which
Strange.
it kind of seems unfair. I mean, I understand that from like a marketing perspective, but
Hmm.
Jennifer Beals, I'm assuming, had to go out and do press for this movie, like the talk show circuit or newspapers or,
Right.
Hollywood tabloids or whatever. Uh, that just seems like such a weird thing to put her in that position of some reporter saying, tell me about all the training you did to have to make it in this movie and all
Right.
the fancy footwork, and she'd have to either lie or say, "Oh, sorry, that wasn't me. That's all these other people that are uncredited."
Well, also too, they wanted to do a sequel badly, and she kept saying no, she didn't want to do it, and they kept raising the stakes. Like they probably got her up to about 10 million, and it said in the notes that she made her agent sick because she wouldn't. And this is natural for a sequel. Now it could have been Staying Alive, but who cares? That's a $10 million check in your hand, back in
In
the
19
'80s
right, in
when that
1983
money meant
dollars.
something.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was gonna say in
1980.
83. Um,
Yeah.
did she
So the
did she say
traffic cop,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say the traffic cop was a local legend. It's interesting that they showed him. He was made famous nationally on Candid Camera. I have no idea if you know what that show
Oh,
was,
yeah.
but it
Mhm.
was yeah, it's a 1960s show where so they put his antics into like a classical music thing, and they did the same thing in Flashdance. His name is let me see if I got Vic Chianca, Cianca, I guess. Yeah, Vic Cianca, and he was a legend in Pittsburgh. It was so cool to see him. I'd forgotten about him.
See, I'm of two minds of that. Yes, that is cool. But while I'm watching this scene, and this is where I put on my old man pants, is because I'm like, that poor guy's just trying to do his job directing traffic during rush hour, and here comes this, college kid messing around with him, screwing up his
Yeah.
vibe. And then at the end, I was disappointed in him because, and this is just 2023 talking again, he actually pulls out, it's a finger gun, but he reaches for his holster and I'm like, oh my God, what is he doing? Like that doesn't
Oh,
fly.
he did all kind of nutty stuff like that. And, again, it was just like, this was so unusual. And he did that for 30 years, probably when they didn't need anybody at that corner anymore. The traffic light sophistication had come along. We didn't need him doing his antics, but they said he loved it so much that they kept him there until he retired, I
Wow.
guess.
Oh, well, I am, as much as I enjoyed this conversation, I think I'm going to retire Flashdance.
Yes.
Um, thanks for talking with me about it. It was my first time watching it. I don't know if I'll ever watch it again, but I had this bizarre
Yeah,
feeling, Pat.
I'm done. I'm
I,
done.
I had a bizarre sensation while I was watching it. When I paused the movie, I think to look up Jennifer Beals' like ethnicity, as I mentioned. I also went over to
Very interesting.
blu-ray.com and I saw that they've got like the 4K of this is like $18 on sale. And I thought, maybe. I don't know
Did
what
you
that
buy a
means.
4K? Did you
No,
buy a 4K player?
no, but yeah, I
I
can
know
watch.
I'm thinking about it, but I have two really good Blu-ray players, and I'm like, seems like redundant.
I
But
will say I have seen 4K films and everything, and that you do notice the difference. It is quite
yeah,
brilliant.
well, you'd have
Almost
to get
eerily so.
you have to uptick your TV as well, correct?
Yeah, it's an investment, but I mean, but I mean, honestly, like 4K TVs now are becoming just like regular HD TVs where, you know, uh,
Oh,
it's like get them in Cracker Jack boxes practically. They're so cheap.
right.
But
Well,
all right.
we'll leave you with two facts. It's the only musical ever shot in Pittsburgh, and it was on the Roger Ebert "I hated it" list.
And I can understand that. That's the perfect place to leave it, because I kind of want to go and read his full review of it, because I could understand being not entertained, but it sounds like he was fundamentally offended by this.
He was offended by it, which to me, there's nothing offensive in it. But then again, I was angry back then, so who knows? Maybe he was still drinking back then.
Maybe even at Mobby's.
R.I.P. Roger.
Yes, definitely. All right, Pat, thank you so much. We'll be back, in June talking about something or other. And
we gotta look at the schedule.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk soon, and it'll hopefully be something nice and summery as well, because as much as I like this as a kickoff to the season, it hasn't been that great a kickoff to the season because it's FLASHDANCE. But
it's 40 degrees outside by the lake.
that too, but all right, just get your welding helmet on.
All right,
warm you right up. All right, man, take care, and I'll catch you later.
That's right.
Bye.
Blessings all.
Blessings.